Voice of San Diego, Friday 5, live at 5. My name's Scott Lewis. I'm the CEO and editor-in-chief at Voice of San Diego. Welcome to the Friday 5, live at 5. We'll go through 5 stories, 5 things we think you should care about, or I think you should care about. This is just my deal. We're going to go through them. A lot of interesting things this week. Let's just jump right in. Number 1. The Kevin Faulconer has decided to run for governor. The San Diego's former mayor, Kevin Faulconer, officially runs for governor. He had only been exploring, and now he is found. He's running for governor, official run for governor. He had, in my opinion, he had kind of like 2 options, right, for where to announce. There's either a school that's closed or the French Laundry. Those are the two places that Kevin Faulconer can launch his campaign for governor. Didn't want to go to the fancy French restaurant. Instead, he went to the schools.
Gavin Newsom said public schools would start reopening this month. Another plan that has failed. Another broken promise. Schools across the nation have safely reopened.
So he wants the schools opened. Okay, so let's remember for a second, he was mayor in the city of San Diego from 2014 until just the last 2 months ago. What did he do to open the schools in San Diego when he was mayor? Well, there's only one thing I remember him doing to open schools, and we talked about it on this show a few months ago. It was this letter he met with and spent time with the San Diego Education Association, the union that represents teachers at the San Diego Unified School District, and the superintendent at the San Diego Unified School District. And he said, basically, test. If you look closely, he said, we request no less than 10,000 COVID-19 diagnostic tests per day, or no less than 50,000 COVID-19 diagnostic tests per week, covering students and staff. That was his big plan for opening the schools back then, was to test 10,000. Now the Governor Gavin Newsom has said the teachers should get tested once per week. So for San Diego Unified School District, that would be not 10,000 tests. It'd be about 1,000 tests per day. So he actually has a higher standard than the governor does to open, and yet he's the one yelling at the governor to open. Not sure exactly what changed there with the Kev. His plan, he's now hammering on the schools to open. So let's go on. We got a lot to talk about with that. But one thing that really shook things up this week was the Centers for Disease Control. The new leader there made this announcement in a conversation about the school.
There is increasing data to suggest that schools can safely reopen, and that safe reopening does not suggest that teachers need to be vaccinated in order to reopen safely. So while we are implementing the criteria of the advisory committee and of the state and local guidances to get vaccination across these eligible communities, I would also say that safe reopening of schools is not, that vaccination of teachers is not a prerequisite for
Not a prerequisite of opening schools. Vaccines are not a prerequisite of opening schools. Gavin Newsom, we talked about that last week, was already met with the teachers union and the school administrators and basically said, like, hey, if you want vaccination for teachers to be a prerequisite for opening schools, then they're not going to open this spring. Now, today, Richard Barrera, who is the president of the San Diego Unified School Board, he said on Fox 5 in San Diego in a very good interview that he thinks they could open by the spring, but they have to see the community spread go down and the teachers have to get vaccinated. So let's go on to that question. Vaccination. What is the deal with vaccination right now? Let's go big picture and then bring it down. Here's the vaccine dashboard as of last update. 586,000 doses shipped here. 347,000 jabs so far. Huh? 347,000 jabs. More than almost 12% of the population has gotten a dose of vaccine. More people have been vaccinated in San Diego County than have officially gotten COVID-19. Now, there's probably a lot of other people who got COVID-19, but of the official tested positive, there's now far fewer people who tested positive than who have gotten vaccine. And when you add them both together and all their immunity, we're getting somewhere, folks. I'm feeling some hope. I am feeling some hope. Got a good portion of the population now inoculated to whatever degree the inoculation of being sick and getting the vaccine or getting the vaccine means. Still up in the air, apparently. But we've got that going for us. So the vaccines, are they going to be required? So we just heard from the CDC lady say they shouldn't be required. Gavin Newsom says, not sure that you're going to want to say they have to be required to open schools. Locally, Richard Barrera says absolutely they have to be required. They have to be out, and a good portion of the teachers, maybe not all, need to be vaccinated before we open schools, and we have to bring the case rate down. Let's talk about the case rate. Right now, in the county of San Diego, the adjusted case rate for all the tests that we're putting out is at 42.5 per 100,000 people. That's new cases per 100,000 people, only 42 at this moment. Now, only 42 used to be 6 or whatever. So 42 is not great. However, look at where it was, 69% just a month ago. Down to 60, 49. You can see the trend here. It is going down. Things are looking better. We've shown this chart since the very beginning of this stupid pandemic. Now it's still higher than it should be, like 3 times higher than it used to be over the spring or the fall. But look at that trend. Great trend on hospitalizations. So what is the deal with vaccines? Well, the county kind of stepped in it, or the state did, when they put out guidelines saying that healthcare workers could be getting the vaccines, and they listed every possible healthcare worker. I don't know that they needed to do this. Everything's overmanaged these days. Listed every possible healthcare worker and included cannabis workers in there. Jim Desmond from the state was like, you're going to put pot workers in before teachers? And well, first of all, a lot of cannabis employees do interact with like very ill people. It does happen. It is a medicine that is being used for those purposes. But also, a little bit of sticky. I understand. I've been wanting teachers to get vaccinated. Felt a little awkward for cannabis workers to get the priority. Understand their healthcare role. So the county said, "Oh, sorry, we took them out." They put out a new thing and listed a bunch of things that are on there, including the ski patrol. The ski patrol. Did you guys ever watch the 1990 classic Ski Patrol? Just a fantastic movie. Just a truly fantastic movie. But the Ski Patrol was on there, but cannabis workers out. I had somebody tweet me and say, like, you can live here and still be a Ski Patrol member. And I was like, I know, I get it. Yes. Probably somebody lives in Escondido, drives up to Big Bear to serve on the Ski Patrol with all the threatening avalanches at Big Bear. I know Ski Patrol does a lot more. My mother was assisted by Ski Patrol a couple years ago, and she took a giant jump, landed on her shoulder, did a couple of tricks in the air. Sorry, Mom. Yeah, it was just a little icy. But anyway, Ski Patrol, I understand Ski Patrol's medical use. Let's maybe get after teachers, cops. Seems like they could use it as well. So vaccines, again, let's go back to that dashboard. Going well. That number, the fully vaccinated percent, is going up, 1-2% every day. That's great. Good stuff. But this is a fever pitch about schools this week. So part of the thing that really drove it up was what the news that came out of San Francisco. Did you guys see this? London Breed, the mayor of San Francisco, along with the city attorney, Herrera, I think is his name, sued the San Francisco school district for refusing to outline a plan for when it would open. And everybody around the state was like, oh my gosh, wow, that's a big step to sue the school district for not outlining a plan of when it was going to open. The school district angered some folks this week when they spent like a 7-hour meeting talking about renaming schools away from like Lincoln School and stuff like that to, something else, and not talking about ever opening the schools. What was the plan for that part? And so the London Breed sued them and said, you got to come up with a plan. You have to at least tell us what the plan is. So there's intense pressure building now on these schools, districts, and these teachers associations to come up with the actual outline of what they need to see in order to open. Here, it seems like our Will Huntsberry did a piece this week about the vaccines and whether that is required or not. Recommend checking that out. But it seems to be clear that San Diego Unified has made the decision vaccines have to be required it's required that they be, I guess, totally available, although they don't want to mandate it for the teachers. Kind of an interesting dilemma at that point. If they're required in order to open, are they required to take? Come here for the big questions. So we're going to be watching that question really closely. Richard Barrera, again, today on Fox 5, said he thinks that we can both A, make it available and comprehensively adopted by teachers in the next few weeks, and B, that the spread of the virus can go down to such a point where we could see kids going back to San Diego Unified Schools before the end of the school year. I think a lot of us have already kind of punted on before the end of the school year, but fantastic. We'd consider it. Mostly would like to know for sure that we can get open by the fall. If you can't get open after the vaccines, what do you need to see at that point? Assuming the spread goes down if the vaccine really works. So this is going to be really interesting to watch over the next few weeks. Schools, vaccines, requirements for vaccines. Now, San Francisco's school district or teachers union responded to the lawsuit, not necessarily to the suit, but put out today their criteria for getting out of this remote learning situation and going back to the schools. San Francisco's teachers union came out and said, if you give us vaccines, we'll open in red tier. If you don't give us the vaccines, we will open in the orange tier. So remember, we're in the purple tier right now. Remember this chart? See that 42.5 at the bottom? That has to get to 7. So it's been at 69 to 60 to 49 to 42. It's got to keep going down to get to 7 to get us into the red tier. And then In the red tier, what San Francisco's teachers are saying, if you're in the red tier, we'll open if you give us the vaccine. If you don't give us the vaccine, we'll open. We have to wait till it's even in the orange tier. Be kind of nice if San Diego teachers and the district came out with something similar. What are we going for? This would be a lot easier if we knew what we're going for. Otherwise, the despair gets a little overwhelming. Little overwhelming. All right, let's move on. Number 3. All right, number 3. A couple weeks ago, we talked about San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria's first State of the City speech since he became the mayor, the new mayor, not the I mayor, what he was before. I'm sorry I said that. That was such a stupid name. I mayor. God, that's not like a personal music thing or something. Anyway, Todd Gloria said this during his speech.
Behind the ribbon cuttings and news conferences, the city faced structural budget deficits. I've inherited a budget deficit that exceeds $150 million and will require difficult decisions to preserve neighborhood services.
What he's talking about there is a structural budget deficit. Now, the thing about a structural budget deficit is there's an annual budget deficit, which is the difference between how much you spent that year and how much you brought in, right? And if it's lower, if you brought in less than what you spent, you got to close that gap. You got to make changes to the organization to close that gap. Especially in the city of San Diego, in all cities and in the state, they have to balance their budget every year. And unlike the federal government, they can't run a bigger and bigger deficit. It has to balance out every year. Now, obviously, they make a lot of tricks to make that happen, but that's the general principle. Has to happen that way. Now, a regular budget deficit, you might say, is, oh, well, we had a pandemic, so things went down. So if we just figure out how to get through this year, we'll be okay. That's a kind of like regular deficit. A structural deficit says, no. Your business, your organization is set up to spend more money than it is set up to bring in. That's a structural budget deficit, which means you have to make structural changes in order to balance that. So what Todd Gloria is saying in his speech, in this section of his speech, is the past mayor made that worse. He set the city up to spend more than it is set to bring in. And so this budget deficit we're experiencing this year is not just because of the pandemic and all the problems, like the fact that there's no hotel taxes at all, but it's also because this guy built a city that was too big for how much it costs to run or how much money they bring in to pay for it. That's a pretty solid attack on a Republican, by the way, who's running against the incumbent Democratic governor of the state that he just made government bigger and didn't bring enough money in or cuts to make it possible. Now, putting that aside, we asked Todd Gloria this week, our Lisa Halverstadt, what the deal was. Did he really have an idea of what he would change to make that structural budget deficit go away? What is he talking about? And he said, we asked him, and they're like, well, and they gave her a bunch of different answers. They had trouble getting back to her. Finally, they're like, well, the thing is, here's the thing. Kevin Faulconer expanded city government, and he truly did. So Lisa looked back on this. 2015, Kevin Faulconer came in, and there were 10,478 full-time equivalent employees at the city of San Diego. And when Faulconer left, there were 11,727. That's a growth of almost exactly 10%. Kevin Faulconer expanded city employment by 10%. Now, to be clear, a full-time equivalent employee is not necessarily one. So you have two part-timers who fill a full-time job. That's one full-time equivalent. FYI, if you're looking at city budget documents. It's a whole language. They create this complex whole language for how city governments and school governments work and such, so that you can't understand it. That's why they do it. I mean, that's not why, but it has that effect. So invest in social organizations like Voice of San Diego to make sense of it for the broader public so that we can be part of this democracy. Anyway, that's a digression. He says, okay, so they expanded it and they didn't raise money to pay for that expansion of the city. The second thing he said is, we want to pay employees more. It's true. He and 8 of the 9 city council members did say we want to pay the employees a lot more. But wanting to pay employees a lot more, however merited that is not itself an ingredient to a structural budget deficit. That's saying, I want to spend more money, thus you should give me more money. That's that. That's not a structural budget deficit. That's a deficit of what you want to do versus what, like, you got the resources to actually do. So he said structural budget deficit. So what was the other thing he brought in? He said, hold on, I'm going to prioritize I can tell my kids just got on the internet and they're watching their shows and playing their games and stuff. So I'm going to knock them down a degree. If you get these, I can set my priority device so that I'm the one who gets the internet. Because this is far more important. Whatever show in Minecraft they're doing, you and us figuring this stuff out, 100% more important. I'm now prioritized. All right. So paying people, wanting to pay people more, not an ingredient to a structural deficit. The third thing he brought up was the pensions. So true, this year the city's pension bill is going up about $50 million, itself about 20% more than it was before, $50 million more. And, Faulconer knew that was coming, did not increase any revenues to pay for it. So yeah, that is an ingredient to a structural budget deficit. And then the last thing he brought up was this stormwater issue. Basically, the state told the city, you've got to stop letting so much water run into the ocean that's dirty. And so you have to build infrastructure to make that better and just to make sure that the place doesn't flood. And adding up everything that we would have to do to make that possible, it costs like billions of dollars. And so Gloria was saying, we haven't set any money aside to do that. So I think you can go a roundabout and try to make that part of a structural budget deficit. But that's more of like, we should eventually fix the house so that poop doesn't come off of it and get into our water. Bird poop and stuff. Come on. And that's not like an annual, that's like a thing you should do. It's a little bit different than a structural budget deficit in what might be the classical sense. So that's Todd Gloria's discussion about the deficit. That's what he did. He said, we got a structural budget deficit that the last guy left us. We want to fix that. And we asked him what that was. Check out Lisa's story. All right, I'm going to check into the comments real quick. Oh, man. Jeff always here with the public bank. So this is the concept of, he's here, he's loyal. I'm going to go give him a quick explanation. This is the concept where instead of borrowing money from Wall Street banks when we want to build stuff, we should create our own bank and borrow it from that and not have to pay so much interest. That's what that is. He's into it. Been doing it a couple years. What's this one? Give us details on the opening of schools. Maybe we won't leave San Diego Unified if you tell us what is happening and make a plan. Exactly. People who don't have purpose, who don't have goals, they get sad and upset. And we've got to have a place that we're going. And you can't just keep saying like community spread needs to get better, all that stuff. Say exactly what we need to hit, exactly how many people need to get vaccinated. And if it seems a little too ambitious, we can talk about like what it should be. But that would give us a lot more thing. And especially when there's so many other people going to school. I have a friend who's like, whenever this topic comes up, he's really quiet, and because he knows how fired up about it I am. And one time I realized, oh, like, you're not talking because your kid's in school, in a public school, like not that far from here. Like, anyway, when that's going on, it causes dissonance, and humans repel from dissonance in their head, and they need to know what they're going for. So give us something to go for. It's key. All right. Number 4. Okay, this was an interesting story by Mackenzie Elmer this week. So the county of San Diego has committed to being carbon neutral by 2035, which means that all the cars, all the fires, everything that the county emits, all the carbon, global climate change inducing gases that the county emits, it needs to neutralize. And so without a big like carbon scoop that you can scoop the carbon out of the air with, then the real scoops that we have are Earth itself provided. The planet has had more carbon than this before, but what happens is trees grow and plants grow, and they take the carbon out and they cooled the planet. Well, so there are farmers in San Diego who want the county to be able to invest in them as this sort of mitigation strategy. They also want businesses. So let's say you're a housing developer, you're going to build housing, you need to lower your carbon footprint. If you could pay a farmer to create more plants that take out the carbon, maybe you could, make the exchange that way. So Mackenzie Elmer did a story about that concept and about those farmers who want to do that. She talked to a couple of them, and they explained some of the things that they're wrestling with as they try to make sure that they're able to measure that so precisely that they can make a deal like that. They can measure what effects their actual farming or their creations can do in taking carbon out of the atmosphere so that it can balance out the emissions that are happening elsewhere. So really interesting story. Check that out. Mackenzie explains that stuff really well. That is the carbon farms. All right. And number 5. So this is just me messing around. We'll take your questions, talk about, are your kids in school? Love to hear from you. Are they not? What do you need to see? If you're an educator, I'd love to hear from you. Do you need to be vaccinated, or do you need to just have a bunch of people in the community vaccinated? What do you like to see? I'd like to hear that. So as your questions come pouring in, there was we had Groundhog Day this week, and literally that morning, I was doing one of my dumb workouts in the morning. I looked over and love that song. This is Megan Wood, our producer here. She's fantastic. No, there was no band playing. There was no symphony playing when Mr. Gopher came out. He's not a groundhog. He's a gopher, but he looked like a groundhog. And he was way too stupid to look for his own shadow. I don't know what 6 more weeks of winter here looks like. I guess we have to keep wearing our warm shirts for a little bit longer. I think he would have seen his shadow. Also, if you're interested, I'll be doing a writing workshop for the San Diego Press Club in a couple of weeks. Here was their announcement. Scott Lewis Zoom event. Love it. Scott Lewis Zoom event, February 16th, 6 to 7. Give him a donation. We'll talk about writing. There's nothing I love doing more than talking about writing. Andy Keats responded to that tweet, and he's like, no, I don't want to hear that. He's literally heard every word that I've ever said about writing 400 times. So he probably won't be donating to the press club. But if you would like to hear any of my thoughts on writing, you could come to that. All right, I want to hear from you. Are you teachers or students or parents? What do you think you need to see from the schools? Do you not understand structural budget deficits at the city? You want me to talk more about those kinds of things or public banks? What are you interested in? What are you an educator? Or what do you need to see to go back? Let's check out your question. I would go back tomorrow if I could. Okay. Yeah. See, I think there's a whole contingent like just open now. Like what there are schools open. We know about them and we know how they work. And so, let's just get after it. I think, I got this letter today from Sharp, my medical provider. And it was like, it looked like important vaccine information. And I opened it and it was like, good news. People over 65 can get vaccinated. And then I think they must have just sent it to everybody because I'm not 65. Nothing wrong with 65-year-olds, but I am not 65. I am far from 65. But in that letter, it said at the bottom, remember, even if you get vaccinated, you should still, wash your hands and socially distance. And I gotta say, I am so sad. You guys who are fans of this show, I've seen Kim Prather on here a number of times. She's made it clear that the most important thing is the air. When we share our air, we share virus. That's what happens. That's how this thing spreads. It does not spread from surface contact. Yeah, sure, there's been like rare occasions where they've verified it was. It spreads because it's in the air. Sometimes it stays in the air. Sometimes it goes all the way across a room. And when people are singing or shouting or at church or at choir practice, it goes everywhere. Wouldn't it have been great if throughout this time, every time you saw one of those, wash your hands, it also included like ventilate, clean the air. Washing your hands is nowhere near as important as being in well-ventilated settings. Drives me nuts. If every school, we saw a school this week where they were touting what they'd done to it, and they just put up a picture of a bunch of plexiglass places. And I don't want to see your plexiglass. That only works if the snot goes and lands right on the plexiglass. The aerosols go all around, and then the plexiglass makes it harder for them to get out. Don't show me plexiglass. I don't like the plexiglass. Anyway, if schools have adapted true ventilation practices, like I've heard San Diego Unified has, and Kim Prather is so proud of what they've done at San Diego Unified, and you use the air, monitoring carbon dioxide monitoring things to check how much carbon dioxide is in there to verify that ventilation's happening, you could really be safe. And so if they're doing that, and they get the case rate down, and they get the vaccines, that kind of seems like a winning formula. We should just go. My son's in a charter school and attends a hybrid model. I'm so grateful because he has learning disabilities and special needs. I grieve for those students who cannot get the services. I know. It is horrific to think about some of the kids that aren't getting the services they need. And I know it bothers them too. I'm not saying they don't. But it is really hard. It's bad. It's bad. And we need to deal with how bad it's going to be for a long time. And even if we're like, keep it closed, you still have to deal with the fact that like there are a lot of people who are falling behind, who are struggling, not being able to keep up. And then the damage this is being done to the careers. Sarah Libby had a really interesting opinion article in our piece, in our website about the $2 billion the governor wants to put up to incentivize schools to open, to get these practices right, to set a standard. And none of the school districts want it. And Sarah wrote, well, maybe give that $2 billion to parents and mothers who are struggling right now, dealing with their careers having fallen apart, everything to make this work. Provocative. All right. That's Voice San Diego. That's all the enriching content. You can get a lot more too. I skipped over a couple stories I wanted to make sure I mentioned. You can find them on voicesandiego.org. You can always donate if you care about this kind of investigative and explanatory reporting. or this, this awesome show or podcast or anything that we do. Our newsletters come out every day. The morning report comes out every day. And we could use all the help in spreading the word about the value of this service. So thank you so much. Have a good week. I'm taking next week off. I'm not going to work. I'm going to put the out of office reply on, and don't expect a response. That's the best thing that happens with vacation. It's not the leaving. It's not the swimming. I'm not leaving anywhere, but just being able to put the out of office reply out is the beauty. So you will not have me to kick around next week. Let's check this out. There's a comment. As an educator, it can at times seem like parents don't seem to really care about us, our health. They just want kids back in school. I need to feel like we are all in this together instead of finger pointing at the teachers and union. I want to be able to trust that parents will be partners to enforce mask wearing. I get that. And look, as an employer, I get like employees need to feel safe. I understand that. Absolutely. And it is absolutely not true that we don't care about the health of the educators. I think there's probably a similar feeling on the other side that the educators don't feel about concerned about the health and well-being of the people who are at home struggling to be co-teachers while maintaining their own careers as well, and all the teachers themselves who are trying to take care of their own students, their own kids. So yeah, I think we could drop some of that mutual suspicion and anger, but we've got to see what the plan is, what the hope is, what the what the goal is, where are we headed, and how can we be a part of the solution? What can we do to help? And yes, absolutely. If we were to go back in the next few weeks, you should absolutely require masks and ventilation. We should have the highest possible standards for ventilation. And I think we can get there. They got hundreds of millions of dollars in special support. They're not going to have a budget crisis. Plus, they have billions of dollars set aside from construction bonds that are supposed to be used for specific equipment and building needs. So maybe instead of building like a stadium or something, build the necessary adaptations to the schools to make them work. I'm all for it. Absolutely. Employees need to feel safe. If my employees didn't feel safe, then they wouldn't work very well. That's how it works. So, but what do you need to feel safe? If vaccines aren't enough, ventilation's not enough, and community spread at a certain level is not enough, then you're kind of saying that the virus has to be completely eradicated to go back. And that's never probably going to happen, right? Like it'll be around in some form forever. I don't know. I'd assume. So how are you taking Trevor Bauer to the Dodgers? Have him. This is the scuzzball pitcher who played with every team's emotions over the summer, says some vile things. Great pitcher, won the Cy Young Award for played for the Indians, Reds. Now he's at the Dodgers. Have him. The Dodgers are going to be really good. The Padres are going to be really good. Let's go. I love our teachers. I want them safe. I want a plan from the district. The only finger pointing I'm doing is in that district. Yeah, exactly. Our representatives are the trustees, and they're the ones who need to deal with this. And they need to give you trust, and they need to give us expectations that are well managed. They need to make their employees feel safe, and they need to make their clients, their constituents, clear on what they're doing and why they can't open when places nearby can. All right. Thank you all. I won't see you next week. Hope you all stay safe. Hope you all get in line for the vaccine. Spread the word about the vaccine. Help somebody sign up. And we will talk to you in a couple weeks. Thanks all.